Okay, just to show the using Ryzen Master core now. Ryzen Master is an app that helps you to overclock the PC. We're just on default at the moment, so we're just using the default settings for the CPU. So the score with the default is only 9,907 points, and GPU obviously AMD Ryzen Fury 9 Fury. So as you can see, the clock speed, I don't think all the cores were, not sure if all the cores were running, but they were kind of on and off between 2 or 3 gigahertz. But I don't think it was using all the cores, so they tend to kind of have some of them on and some of them off, but I'm not sure. So I wasn't running same time, but we know that this is where the CPU, as you can see here, the CPU is running at full here, and then it goes down. It goes just almost CPU load drops, and then you get a sudden burst here as you frames per second. And I think this is CPU test, so it's just testing the CPU's ability to how many frames you get with it. And the temperature shoots up here to 85 degrees C. So we're going to see how the performance is with 3.3 gigahertz, which will be just a straight line instead. Okay, so we're going to go and do this test again with that 3.3 gigahertz. So now the CPU is hovering about on default, which is about 4.2, 1.8, something like that. It's not really any particular load on the CPU. So we're going to change that to manual and apply. So now it should stay at a constant 3 gigahertz. Let's see how this goes. So 3 gigahertz, 4.31 gigahertz. Okay, so we're just testing with 3D Marks on Time Spy. So we're just going to change this. So we did the test in at 4.325 gigahertz with 1.325 volts. This seems to be the most stable temperature, but voltage and frequency. I've had some issues with programs seeming to crash. I don't know if they crash because of this. I've had a few reboots, but mostly stable, but not sure exactly. I seem to be mostly rebooting unexpectedly in the middle of things, so it may be some instability at 4.31 gigahertz. But the performance in terms of, so you can see it got a more or less a stable 4.3 gigahertz, no waving like in the last test. The default settings, the performance I've done a few times with this setting seems to be around 10,600 to 10,400, 379 in this case. GPU seems to be the same, and the performance between overall performance 5,200 to 5,260, so it's not much difference really. Only major performance seems to be the CPU score, which seems to go down depending on the performance, but it's about 500, 600 points variation between the defaults and the preset overclock that I have here. And the temperature remains more or less stable on the CPU, GPU rising there. So the only time you really see any increase in temperature hits 90 degrees when it was at full load, when you had a drop in the GPU. Highest the GPU had was 71 degrees. So yeah, that's the performance with this. Yeah, the maximum frames per second was 45. I think I have got 36 on one of the tests, so probably why it was a bit higher in the one of the other tests, just a few variations in frame speed. So probably not a whole difference. That's the results with first time spy score marks, 3D marks. So I think there's not a huge difference. Don't think there's a huge difference between default or manual overclock, but slightly more may get a little bit more heat if you are fully rendering, but defaults is a little bit more volatile. But that's really the overclock.